And welcome to Ladyada.
Hey everybody, and welcome to my desk. I hope everyone is staying nice and cool. It's been hot here in New York, but that means it's time to stay in and have some iced tea and work on electronics, which is what I've been doing. Mr. Lady, do we have any updates, news, things we want to tell people?
We'll be doing show and tell this week. Lots of new products and videos and more surprises. Um, we're pumping out a lot of new products and open source code that'll empower a lot of people to do a lot of neat things. Ladyada will show you exactly what I'm talking about. There's a lot of folks who like to make things with displays or with Raspberry Pis or with microcontrollers. And we're getting back to some of the really tough projects.
I'm gonna literally dust off a project here.
Yeah,
Literally, it's like covered in dust.
yeah.
That's how long it's been on my desk. Okay,
And let's
let's
see what's
kick
on
it.
your desk.
All right, let's go to my desk and we'll check it out. Okay, so here is what I've been working on this week. And this is, again, like a 2020 era project that got just delayed because TFT prices just like skyrocketed. I don't know when people remembered, but these displays went from being, you know, $5 to $10 to like $30 a piece. And I was like, okay, I can't do any projects with TFTs, and chips were unavailable, diodes weren't available, but everything's really calmed down a lot. And so I'm going to get back to some of the stuff that I designed, but didn't get to finish. So this is your standard, bog standard 5-inch diagonal 40 pin TFT display with, TTL, call it TTL RGB display. So this has, 8 bits red, 8 bits green, 8 bits blue, parallel, VSync, HSync data enable, pixel clock, on off, a backlight with a bunch of LEDs in series. And this one doesn't have a resistive touchscreen. And sometimes, these screens, this is a 4.3-inch one. I think this is 800 by 480 actually, but it's 4.3-inch. It's a little less diagonal. And you'll see it's got the same connector. It's a very, very standard connector. I call them just 40 pin TTL. And it's also got a separate capacitive touch overlay. So this is a separate, totally separate electronic piece. It's glued on top. So you can see there's the TFT just like this, but it's also got this glass capacitive touchscreen. And then these are often like Focal Tech FT something, something, something. They're almost all compatible with each other. I2C capacitive touch chips. And so this is like a 6-pin connector, power, ground, reset, SCL, SDA, and IRQ. Pretty much it's all, well, maybe address instead of reset. But even it says actually, if we can, let me focus in on it. It's kind of nice. You can even see here it says SCL, SDA, VDD, reset, int, ground. One thing I will notice is though, even though this 40-pin connector is like nearly standardized, the 6-pin connector for the capacitive touch is like all over the place. Like sometimes the connector's over here, sometimes the connector goes long, sometimes it's flipped, sometimes it's this way. Sometimes it's one pin out, one time it's the other, sometimes it's 6-pin, sometimes it's 8-pin. That part's not as a standard, although 6-pin is very, very common. So in the shop, go to the computer, please. I'll show these in the store. So, you have in the store, we have the resistive touch and the non-resistive. I'm going to get capacitive touch now that I'm kind of doing more of the stuff. And I'm like, oh, I should have a capacitive touch version of these displays. And traditionally, how you would connect this to something like a Raspberry Pi is there's two kind of known ways. One, you go with HDMI. And an HDMI backpack like this one uses a TFP 401. There's actually a couple chips that do this. There's like an AD78 something something or 7644. There's the RT622 series, which has a scaler in it, which is kind of nice, but is otherwise like very hard to use. Documentation sucks. It's like you have to use an 8051 compiler. Well, one of the annoying things about these displays work great. What's nice is HDMI and HDMI universal, which means you can plug this into your Xbox, you can plug it into your GoPro camera, you can plug it into your phone, you can plug it into your Raspberry Pi, you can plug it into your Windows box, your Mac. It always works. But these chips are very hot. They take up a lot of energy. They draw like I think like 300 milliamps at 5 volts. And they're not cheap. Like these chips are also like $8 a piece. They're kind of expensive. Now they do, which is why this is like, it's like, whoa, it's 70 bucks. Why? Because this chip is like $8 to $10. And then, you add the cost of assembly and the TFT. So even though these work great when you have HDMI, they're expensive. And then the other way you can connect displays is with the DPI, the display parallel interface on a Raspberry Pi. And this is like what I call like a DPI TFT Kipa. It's not quite a hat, it's a little bit less, because it uses all the pins. And what this does is it has every GPIO almost from the Raspberry Pi connected to, usually not all 24 bits. Usually we do 18 bits. So like 666, red, green, blue, which is still very high quality color. Like most people can't tell the difference between, especially for these small screens, the difference between 18-bit and 24-bit color is huge. And then of course the VSync, HSync, pixel clock. And you can even tell, like definitely when the Raspberry Pi folks designed the Raspberry Pi 2x20 connector, you can see that they definitely made sure that they had all the pins available to be able to use this interface, because the pins are very fixed. Like you can't change which pin is VSync or HSync or red, green, blue. They're very fixed in the documentation. I think Raspberry Pi DPI pinout. I think they have a yeah, they have the documentation here. Yeah, DPI. There's a couple different configurations, but for the most part, you can't really change the pins. And not only can you not change the pins, but no, this one doesn't have it. But like the H sync and the V sync are on like the I squared C pins. So if you want to do something like add capacitive touch, or you want to add resistive touch through I squared C, you have to do like bit bang I squared C and the device tree overlays and change the pins. And it's like, basically it's annoying, especially then you're like, oh, well, I wonder if I want to connect an I2S amplifier for high quality audio along with my nice screen. You can't, because the I2S pins are completely overtaken by the DPI pinout. So the other option is you use the DSi connector. So let's go back to the overhead and I'll show off the DSi connector. So the DSi connector is this thing, which says display. Remember, this is camera and display. The only thing is the Pi Zeros don't have this connector. It's the one thing basically that got left off. But the all the Raspberry Pi A pluses and the B pluses have them. They've had them for quite a while. And the CM modules, the compute modules, also have access to the DSi, the pinout. And what's neat about this is it's a 2-lane MIPI interface. It's differential, 2 lanes, so data 1, data 2 differential, and clock differential, so 6 data lines. And it can control like fairly large displays. Like 2 lanes will get you, I think, up to like definitely 720p, but I think you can even get like, like 1000 by 720 pixels or something. You can get fairly large displays. Maybe not 4K. I think for that you need 4 lanes. I don't know the exact math, but you can get nice little displays. And in fact, that's how the Raspberry Pi. If you go to the computer again, I'll have a lot of back and forth today. So the Raspberry Pi display. So the foundation display, you'll notice if you look at the screen here, oh, that looks just like, it's kind of your standard-ish 40 pin. You got lots of parallel lines here, so it's RGB. And then it connects to this driver board. And I think on the back, and then the driver board has the DSi, and it also has, it looks like USB power, and then there's like a microcontroller. And then this is, I think, panel power. I actually don't know I don't remember what the USB A is for. I know you can power it from, you can give it extra power, but yeah, it sits underneath and you can give it extra power. And then this is the DSi cable. You'll notice that other than the power pins, the GPI is free, and so is the HDMI. Okay, so and then you have a nice case. So it's a very sweet. And this one has capacitive touch. It's quite fancy. So this is, and oh, the chip that it's using on here is, I believe, the Toshiba TCX something something something, which is the Toshiba DSi to RGB. It is the TX, it's probably something like the TX58778XBG. Wonderful chip. I'm sure it's great. It's not inexpensive, and it's a BGA. If you know me, I'm not a huge fan of BGAs because they're like really annoying to rework and pick in place. You know, you can't lay them out easily. Usually need like a 4-layer board. So while this chip is, I'm sure, super awesome, what I wanted to do was instead use the ICN6211. And the ICN6211, which doesn't have great documentation, but we can maybe Google something. And it's by, whoops, sorry, I went to my other tab. Yeah. So this is a also DSi to RGB. It is a lot less documented than Toshiba, but it does do kind of what you want. It can give you up to 4 lanes of RGB, and then sorry, of DSi data, and then it can convert it to 24-bit color with HSync, VSync, DEP clock. And it also does I2C for control, and you just have to give it the data and a clock signal and some power, and it's pretty much good to go. The only thing that's a little annoying is that there's like there's no like good data sheet. Like there's all these registers, but the registers are not very, like, you can see there's like one register documented. Otherwise, it's like, hey, like, you know, here's some weird stuff, but for some reason they always tell you like how an I2C works, and you're like, I know how I2C works. I want like the register map, but they don't give that to you. Instead, there's like this tool, I think, that they distribute, and then you tell it like kind of what you want for. You have to tell it how big the display is, and the front porch, the back porch, the HSync and VSync width. This is all in the TFT data sheet. So if you go to the data sheet for these, they'll give you not only the pinouts, but at the middle or bottom, they will tell you your timing. Hold on, let me find the timing. Here it is. So each display has their own, like, you know, they're kind of loose with it, but you want to get it somewhat close. Basically, the frequency that they want to drive the pixel clock, and the porch sizes and the pulse polarities. Like some have like a negative H sync and some have a positive H sync. So you just have to like kind of, you look this up, and then you enter it in. This is, you know, what the timing looks like for the different pulses that let the chip in the TFT display synchronize. Yeah, here you go. This is the different porch widths, these little signals. So okay, so the ICN6211 is a, hold on. So is that chip, and it's alternative. And the nice thing about it is it's inexpensive. It's like $1 or less, which is like pretty sweet, because again, that HDMI chip, the TFP401, is like $6 to $8. So $1 is a really good price. So a long-ish time ago, I designed a board that would let me control, connect to TTL displays from DSi. So sorry, let's go back to the overhead. So now I've introduced it, I can actually show it off. So this board has the ICN6211, and it's got the DSi connector going here, and you know, it just connects from the Raspberry Pi. This is power, and I'm actually also using this to track how much power draw this is taking, and it's like very little. Almost all the power is going to the data, to the backlight. I think this only draws maybe 50 milliamps, if that. It's definitely cool to the touch, which is good. On this version, I actually put an AT, an ATSAM D21, because One of the weird things about the ICN6211 is it responds to every I2C address. Like whoever wrote the I2C peripheral, like kind of slapdashed it. So it can't share any I2C. Like you don't want it on your main I2C bus because it'll bash everything else on there, including like your capacitive touch or resistive touch driver chip. So I thought, oh, I'll have like the SAMD set up, because you don't have to set it up on boot. You set up the I2C commands to configure the display and then like it go to sleep. But then I kind of messed around some more and I decided to do a slightly different design, which I'll show. You got a backlight driver here. This will give you, you can configure it. By default, it's 25 milliamps constant current, but you can go up to 100 milliamps constant current. Various I2C. So there's a lot of I2C. There's actually an I2C that comes through the DSi. And so actually what I did on this one is I bridged the DSi to the ICN I2C because I don't have capacitive touch going yet. So I'm like, well, I'll just take up every I2C address on the DSi port, get it configured, and then we're good. And actually you'll notice like, hey, why is this screen all like funky now? That's because actually the screensaver kicked in on the Raspberry Pi. And when it does it, it's the DSi chip it definitely doesn't get signal anymore, but there's no communication between the DSi to RGB chip and the backlight driver. So the backlight driver doesn't actually know that it should shut off the backlight because it's completely separate from the RGB logic. So it's something that, again, you would probably use I'm going to use a microcontroller, and I've done this before. I'll have it listen to the VSync pulse because it's supposed to come every 60 hertz. And if you don't get a VSync pulse in like, half a second, it'll shut down the PWM to the backlight driver. So that's a really easy way to just be like, it's a little use the VSync as a watchdog timer. So yeah, so this is, so if I hit return on this keyboard, it's like pop, comes back up. So yeah, it's just, it basically doesn't know to turn off the backlight. That's the trade-off with this chip. It's not super smart. Whereas I like the RTD 2600 series is definitely like more, you're programming the chip inside and you can have it do all sorts of logical things, and be smart and all that. So, for interfacing to this chip, you do have to, once you've set it the I2C commands, it then just takes DSi to TTL. It does that for you, but you have to set that up. So if you go to the computer, there is a library, and we've hired Timon to do this work because there's like this data sheet, there's this weird ass tool, but we're like, can you like make it into like a library and also, of course, test the hardware? And Timon has done some stuff with these with this chipset. So he's like, oh yeah, like I know exactly what you want. So he did a great job, and he made a library and some example code, and then we just run. This is the Raspberry Pi. I run the test on the code to configure it on the Raspberry Pi for now, and then eventually this register write will be done by a separate microcontroller. So this is just the test where we you configure all the sizes of the back ports. This is being configured to 800 by 480, and you set up the PLL, and you reset it, and you're like, go chip. So I did redo this board a little bit. This version actually has a separate microcontroller that's going to be driving the I2C. This one's also set up to drive these square displays. So if you go to the overhead, I'll show this real fast. We'll wrap up here in a moment. So this is like a 480 by 480, and this is 720 by 720. And these are like funky square displays. This one has capacitive touch and this one doesn't. And they also have a 40 pin, but the 40 pin is like different than the standard 40 pin, which I understand why, but it's a little annoying. One, the capacitive touch pins actually go into the 40 pin. It's convenient. You don't have that separate, like, hi, I'm like dangly. You don't have the dangly. The dangly has been integrated into this connector. And there's also a SPI interface and 2 extra GPIO pins. And the SPI interface is used to configure the onboard TFT driver chip. So not only do you need I2C to connect and set up this DSi to TTL, this TFT is like wonderfully simple. You send it signal and it just starts displaying. With these displays, the square ones, you have to set up a configuration through SPI to tell it, no, you're a 480 by 480, and this is your RGB order, just like you would do with an SPI only display. But basically, after you set up that initialization, you then pipe in TTL. So, like, there's a lot of things to balance. So the last thing before we go on to the great searches, I'm going to literally dust off this. So one of the things I worked on many years ago is I had one of these cool displays. This is unfortunately quite delicate. So this is a 4-inch 800 by 480. So it's really nice. It's got the same resolution as this 5-inch display, but it's a nice compact 4-inch. And I even have a version that has capacitive touch overlay on it. Really good looking. Used for, cell phones, obviously. It's even a cell phone, it looks like a cell phone. It's got the same size and shape. And what I did is this display, it has a 40, it also has that 40 pin connector, and it has like that funky, it's RGB, but also has the SPI communication. So I used, here you can see like a little trinket, a SAMD21 that would connect to the SPI and configure it and set it up. And then tell it, okay, you can then take RGB data. And then over here, I had a, Raspberry Pi 40 pin breakout board that I wired all the red, green, and blue and clock and data pins, and I could get it set up here. And then I did design a board for it as well. So, I'm showing this here so you can see it. Maybe it's a little, hold on. Let me see if I can. It's a little blown out, but sometimes if I do this, there you go. So yeah, it's a very nice crisp display, and you can see the text, and it's like IPS, so it works from any angle. And this is basically the version of this breadboard, but on a full PCB. So on the back here, so you've got that 40 pin TFT, and then there's an ATSAMD 09 here, and this is what is communicating with this over SPI, and also handles that backlight thing. So again, it listens on the VSync, and if the VSync doesn't drop every whatever a couple milliseconds, it turns off the backlight because it's like, okay, the signal's gone. And then this was actually DPI, right? Because this was before I had this ICN6211. So like you can see every single GPIO got used. Like it's a lot of routing. But at the time I was like, well, this is kind of as good as gonna get. And then 2020 happened, and then 2021 happened, and then I kind of like, this was literally been sitting on my desk, dusty for the last couple years, but I've now revised it. So our last thing as we go to the computer, if you can pop to the computer, yeah. So I revised it last night, and so this is the same board, but now instead of having that gigantic 2x20 connector where you use all the GPIO pins, it's all going to a ICN6211. You can see here through these little resistors. This is a resistor packs. The DSi connector, I put a stomach QT on here, and you can switch which port you want to use I2C on. And then I've got a AT Tiny 1616 that's going to do the I2C and SPI on boot noodling. Like when you power it up, it'll quickly do all the resets. It'll write the data to the I2C and SPI ports, and then handle the backlight driving as well. So it'll actually listen over I2C and PWM the backlight. So you can actually do dimming and lighting. I don't know if it'll have like a kernel driver, but at least it'll be over like a very simple I2C interface to set up and write the PWM to change the backlight as desired. So, it's happening. I'm getting back to this. This has literally been on my desk for, it's funny, on my desk, there's like an outline where the dust isn't, because this was sitting on there in the back for the last like 3-4 years. But, I've got all these cool displays. I'm going to get this working. So going to start just getting the breakout working, getting this, this 4-inch hat back in business. And then I'm going to try doing like round displays, square displays, bar displays, all using the DSi interface. So, whew, that's a lot, but we're getting to it. And then, the last piece is we have to get the device tree overlay going for these. But we kind of took the one from this is my setup. Actually, I don't have the DTO open, but we have a device tree overlay. It's basically the Raspberry Pi 7-inch / the ICN6211, and we kind of mushed them together and pulled some stuff out, and we think we can get something going. This will be great because there's a lot of weird ass displays that you want to use, but you don't want to use every GPIO pin on your Raspberry Pi to drive it. I think this could be super fun. Also for making adorable little CM4 products with the compute module. All right, so let's go to the great search.
Where in the world is that part I need? The great search with DigiKey.
The Great Search brought to you by DigiKey and for every single week, Ladyada uses her power of engineering to help you, yes, you find the things you need. Ladyada, what is the Great Search of the week this week?
This actually by a request somebody mailed in. Let's go to the overhead and I'll show what they were asking. So working on this project with the DSi displayed on the Raspberry Pi computer, and actually now a lot of single board computers because they've all cloned the Raspberry Pi. There are these connectors, the DSi, the display connector, and then the CSI camera interface. And one thing that definitely happens, even to me, I'm very careful, is the clip comes out of the connector. And then if the clip comes out, the retaining clip, you can't use it. And it's like very often there's a little ear and the ear snaps and it like flies off the room and the cat grabs it or whatever, or it gets swept up. You don't want to throw away your beautiful Raspberry Pi just because it's got this clip. So let's find replacement connectors. And then we can always reuse the clips. You can gently remove them and replace them for the camera or display interface. They're both the same connector. So let's go to DigiKey. Oh, and I was showing earlier, like there's cool, weird square displays. Check out previous video if you have it. Okay, so what we want is the same connector for the CSI or DSi, and those happen to be, and I know they are 15-pin FPC, flex print circuit board connector, flat flexible connector. We don't want the assembly, we just want the connector itself. Yeah, that's right. It looks like this. I like that they added images. Oh, yeah, all sorts of options. Actually, let's just go to the whole category and then we'll... okay, so contacts. I think we want the one that has like 19,000 available. Let's see. Yeah, so this is, now we're talking. Yeah, there's different configurations and pitches and pinouts. Okay, so the first up, I always, because we want to actually be able to buy this, we're always going to go with the active and number of positions. How many pins? 15. We don't want like half loaded, we want like full 15, so just pick 15. And then pitch. For this, you have to know what the pitch is. You can use your handy calipers to measure the distance between the pins. There are standard sizes, but like 99% of the time, it's going to be either 0.5 millimeter or 1 millimeter. Once in a while, there's others, but it's super duper rare. If it's like very close together, it's almost certainly 0.5. And if it's a little farther apart, it's 1. And if it's alternating, it's like sometimes 0.3. But this one in particular is going to be 1. Oh, and then once in a rare while, it's 0.1 inch, like really fat. Those are old style. Next up, do we want surface mount or through hole? Well, on the Raspberry Pi, it's a surface mount connector. So you want surface mount, and I'll also grab the dash because it could be there's some that aren't categorized. And let's also say only in stock because we want to be able to purchase this today. So this is what we got so far. Whenever I have like, a couple dozen, that's when I start looking and I'm like, okay, what would we have? Okay, these are starting to look good. One thing is that the for the board I'm designing, I wanted a right angle so it sticks out to the side. But for the Raspberry Pi, if you want to replace the connector, it's a sticking up style, which is And you can always see what you're like, oh, this is the style I want. And then look to see the mounting type. So that's surface mount, non-right angle. So let's go to surface mount, not right angle. Okay, so only 10 options. So now we're really talking. Okay, so then you can see that there's still a lot of options. One thing is that some of these connectors, you see, they don't have a retaining clip. You can see the retaining clip here and here. It's a little piece that you pull out, and then it kind of jams the cable in place. Make sure it doesn't pull out too easily, which, depending on some designs, you want the cable to be able to pull out very easily so the cable doesn't get damaged. And it's easy to insert. But in this particular case, we want it to have the retaining clip. So if we look, this is called a slide lock. So these two here are slide lock. It looks like it has a slide lock, but I guess it doesn't. So we're going to go with slide lock. Okay. And now we're down to our 3 options. So there's the 3 options. And then what I do is actually just look at the connector. So let's go to the overhead real fast, and we'll look at what the connector looks like. So, it looks like it's kind of flat because, we want to match the connector as much as possible. And it's got little ears that stick out the side over here. Okay, so let's go back to the computer. Oh, so looking at these, this one actually looks the closest. The coloring is also the same too, which but sometimes, you might not get the right color. The color doesn't matter. It's just like it's to help you indicate which one you think it is. But it's got the little ear sticking out, and it's definitely it doesn't have any like extra notches or anything. So I think that this is going to be the closest, and it's only 50 cents. So if you want to fix your Raspberry Pi, I wouldn't necessarily place a whole order just for this connector, but let's say you have a bunch of them that you want to fix. You get a 10-pack, or if you're ordering stuff from DigiKey anyways, toss this in, and then you'll have it for when your Raspberry Pi connector, if it, you pull it and you break it, you'll have these ready to go to repair it at that time. I have a couple of these always, and I have to fix the one on my desk because I broke the clip. But this is my recommendation. So try it out. FFC 382015G from GCT. Good option, 50 cents.
And that's a great search.
Where in the world is that part I need? The great search with DigiKey.
All right, that's our show for tonight. Thank you so much, everybody. We got a big week ahead. Thanks for joining us.
I can't wait to have big gigantic eyes.
Yeah,
We're gonna do it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. See y'all later.
Bye, everybody.